The next speaker is, I would say, a very dear friend. We've had in the past Eduardo Maldonado come and address us. And then Philip Ferry and I have had the honor of going in 2 times, I think. It's 3 times, isn't it? Brussels, Warsaw, and Amsterdam, 3 times. Address them. I'm going to do one quick introduction, is that most of you know that the European Union's made a commitment to improving building efficiency. And they've done this through a directive called the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive, which in essence, I'm not going to take too much of your time, but in essence requires that all buildings be rated and labeled at the time of change of occupancy or purchase. And more importantly, one of the things they did that is an interesting concept is not only do you do that, but if you're going to improve that building more than 25% of the appraised value, you have to bring it up with the local energy code. Not the different energy code for existing homes, the new energy code. And I think that the fact is that the numbers of buildings and stuff are being deployed in Europe and rated is a real model. And I think the one thing that's been exciting is the exchange of information, finding similarities and techniques, because what we're finding, we're facing many of the same problems. So minds across the Atlantic working together. Eduardo, give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back. Thank you, Steve, for your words, Philip and David. Indeed, the European Union has been working on this for about a decade. Just to give you an idea of when we started, I'm just trying to give you an overview. We started about 10 years ago, about the same time as Resnet, 10 years. I'd consider that up to last year it was the past. That was our first experience. Then we had lessons learned. We thought about it for quite a few times, a couple of years. And so that's the present. I'm going to go through mainly this part and about, of course, the future. What are going to plan? What are our plans for 2020? And you'll see that indeed what we just heard from the previous speakers is valid on the other side of the Atlantic. In 2000, just as background, our effort was like at Florida. I mean, you're from the Florida Center. We import 70-some% of our energy. We'd be losing all our freedom to really dependency on oil imports, and so Europe decided to tackle the problem up front. And so the first directive, that's an EU regulation, I'll come back to that, basically promoted solutions to overcome that problem by having good buildings without any compromise in comfort and indoor air quality. So this link to indoor air quality is very important. I'm very glad that you'll have this development 2 years from now. And the basic measures, there were more, but this is the essential part, is to have a common methodology for assessing the buildings, to apply them as requirements in building codes for any new building and existing buildings above or larger than 1,000 square meters. In floor area, that's 10,000 square feet, more or less. That's really large buildings. Certification schemes for every building, so certificates, rates, and also to inspect and assess boilers and air conditioners. This was done, of course, taking into account all kinds of aspects, at least in theory. You can read the list. It's very comprehensive and difficult. It has quite a few difficult issues to tackle. There was an effort to make a standard. There was a standard. It's not ideal, but it's quite a good standard. And then member states have to adopt it. But you should understand, I think we have to explain this to you, a directive is something that is issued at Central European level, telling member states what they have to achieve, but without telling them how to do it. So each state has the freedom to select their own best solutions, adapted to local needs. So it's not like a regulation that says everybody does it the same way. So here we have 27 different solutions in the 27 different states that we have in Europe. And of course, what we saw, and this is just of course a sample, we saw that the different member states applied new building regulations, and so I just show you the eternal fight in good terms, of course, between Germany and the Netherlands claiming to be the best, and so they all go for significant improvements in the requirements. You see the Netherlands with 40% requirements in 6 years. Germany also, you see the, I don't see, I have the arrow. So this is the point where the first directive came through. There is the second one, I'll talk about that later. But so you see, there is an upgrading step in the building requirements for every step in the way. Of course, not every country did the same. Some of them were a little bit less ambitious, but I'm not going to talk about those. I'm just going to talk about the good ones, of course. So right now we have 27 different certificates in Europe. And as I said yesterday at the board meeting, I specifically chose 3 that are not in English. That way you and I are at equal level, because I don't understand them either. But if you look at them, I'm sure that you get the message. You don't have to read the numbers. We use, in some states, use something similar to the Hertz scale, a horizontal bar. Yours is a vertical. Well, sorry. I think the message is exactly the same. On the right side, many countries use the refrigerator appliance scheme. You also can get a very good idea if the house is good or bad. You're used to it. It's transparent. And then we have in the middle what we call the Ferrari model, which is kind of a car. You know how fast you're going, how best, I mean, that's Italy, of course, by the way. But so we have all variations of these 3 formats in Europe. And you don't have to read the letters. I don't know if anybody of you can read the ones on the right. I can tell it's from Bulgaria. But you know if the house is good or bad. Okay, so we have this working everywhere in Europe right now. And it's working very well. Everybody understands it. Of course, you have to look behind the figure, because each state has a different background. So some use measured values for the energy consumption, others calculate by curves the performance. A few member states will use both. So you can have a sample. You really need to know what's behind the numbers. But within each market, it's a uniform message, and you can indeed understand one another. But it's difficult. If you go from France to Germany to England, it's difficult to compare an A building one place and another. So you have to basically be on an individual member state level. So what have we been doing? Just numbers from 2006, 2010, so basically 3-4 years, depends on when countries started, but this is a sampling. It's just a sample of the issued certificates. So I think compared to the US, for example, where you just said 107 million existing homes, you have a lot of ways to go, and I think it's a huge opportunity, so you should see that as an opportunity. We also have the policy of putting up certificates in public buildings, so every public building larger than 10,000 square feet, more or less, will have to have at the door a certificate, so you can go in as a user and make your master of the building ashamed if he has an F or G or a very low rating, like this particular building that I'm showing. It's not the building, the certificate are not the same for the picture. So this is a way of bringing also this issue of certificates to public awareness. You all have to go to the city hall or to the country courthouse or whatever, and you see this at the door. And so you start thinking, why not put one at my house too? So this is being done by certified or qualified experts. We call our raters qualified experts. It's just, I mean, anybody does use a different name. And these are numbers in some countries. I mean, some small countries have small numbers, like 200 people doing it. Other countries can have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. And a few have even more, but I have not listed them here. So there are many, there are several tens of thousands of people really working on this area all over Europe right now. These experts are critical to the success of all the effort. They have qualified jobs. They are providing advice to the building owners. And of course, what we have seen is that the higher the requirements for entry as qualified experts, the better the results in terms of issued certificates and recommendations for improvement. Of course, we also realize that without quality control, the system can go down very quickly. And so we have established very strict rules about quality control for the certificates that are issued. We changed then into an evaluation mode in about 2007. So 3 years ago, we started evaluating. That's when the world leaders got together and decided to improve energy efficiency worldwide. Europe came up with this 20-20-20 win strategy. So 20% renewables, 20% greenhouse gas emission reduction, 20% efficiency increase by 2020. And it go to the 50-50-50 strategy if everybody would also join, like, for example, the US. It's somewhere in between right now. This led to a revised directive just published less than a year ago, so we're still implementing it. It's still not physically in place. It will be, member states have up to June 2012, so 1 year and a little bit more from now to implement this new directive. And what are the basic news? The basic news is that from now on, from 1 year and a half, let's say from 1 year from now on, the minimum requirements, the code, the building codes, have to be based on an objective life cycle cost, on a very long-term life cycle cost. It's not written because there was no political agreement to do it, but the idea is at least 30 years. So the building is going to be up for more. So you should do it for the life of the building. Of course, for the technical systems, I don't think there is still a boiler that lasts 30 years. Maybe we can find a few, probably not very good right now. But on the technical systems, we have shorter life cycle analysis. But this means that all the states will have lost some freedom to fix their minimum requirements. It's imposed centrally. They have to fix according to this set of criteria. We still don't know the impact right now, but we expect it to be quite large. The second lesson is the 1,000 square meters or 10,000 square foot threshold is a very limiting factor. We're losing most of the small residential market. And so from next year on, everybody will be included. And we have to do it not just for the envelope, but for any other energy saving opportunity. You change your window, you have a requirement on the window. You put up insulation, you have a requirement on the insulation. You tighten the house, you have a requirement on that. You change your boiler, you have minimum requirements on the boiler. Things like that. Every opportunity is an added opportunity that you cannot miss. And so that is the new philosophy too for next year. The third thing that is changing quite rapidly is when do you need a certificate? Before, we required the certificate when you actually sign the papers to buy the house or to rent the house. By then, it's too late. Just imagine you going with your wife or with your husband to select a house. You go through 10, 20 houses. Then you select one you like. It has a good kitchen, good view. Then you go sign the contract. You get a certificate. It says it's an F. Wow. You're not going to change your mind then. It's too late. So we now require that as soon as you enter a market and offer a building for sale or rent, you must have the certificate available immediately. And so also public buildings will be public buildings will be rated in public display starting from 2,500 square feet, more or less. So right now, and this is an example from this year in Paris, if you go to a realtor and try to find a house, you cannot find a house without a rating. So you know it from the start, and you probably then say, this is an F, I don't even want to look at it. So the picture is not very good, but I think it gives you the idea of what's going on. So every new house, every existing house you put up on the market for rent or for sale will have to have this on the publicity. And this is already being said. I'm not going to read through this because it would be tiring, but we also have set quality rules for the certificates. It's not anything different than what Resnet right now has in place. We had a good dialogue, as Steve said. We had the opportunity and the privilege to have you and Philip talking to us in Europe in several occasions. We discussed the best things to do, and we all agree. We have to have all the certificates in a database. We have to have a random control on the quality of the certificates, and also if you have a complaint, then immediately you have quality of evaluation. We need to have penalties. We can expel a rater that is not performing correctly, or suspend, or just give him a fine or whatever. I mean, we don't go immediately for kicking everybody out. Everybody is human, can make mistakes. Of course, we also have realized that very large buildings, and now we're going also into the commercial networks and the commercial buildings, very large buildings require very expensive certificates, because if you are not pragmatic, they can become huge tasks to rate. And so we need simplified things, simplified methodologies, existing buildings. Another thing is, one thing is to have a new building with all the specifications that you can rate. The other thing is going to a 50-year-old building you don't know anything about. So we need pragmatic procedures, otherwise the cost of the certificate is too high and the market will not accept it. What we've been seeing is something like this. You go for certificates, you get what you have right now on the left side. This is the current situation with all the improvements. If they are implemented, then you go to the right side. And this is a huge opportunity for the countries to implement, for Europeans to implement. And of course, the situation here is exactly the same. So this needs to be translated into action. No certificate saves energy. The certificate indicates how owners can save energy. And if they don't get out of the paper, you just spend money. You lost money. And so the directive, the new directive, requires each state to have campaigns and incentives to promote the second part, going from the certificate and recommendations to actual improvements of the buildings. And of course, and this is probably, you know politics as well as I do, and so you know that it is difficult to come up with some numbers that compromise people. But what the new directive says is that, and this is really the statement taken out of the directive, EU countries must implement ambitious plans to retrofit the existing building stock. The word ambitious is not defined. So each member state will have to define its own level of ambition. 1%, 5%, 50%, 100%, whatever. This is what you want to do. And if you look at the cities, and this is a European city and an American city, I mean, they probably look different, but they are not really different in terms of the challenge to accomplish this. So we need investments, innovation, schemes. This is still not worked out. It's being worked out. And of course, we'll have probably quite a few years before we have a solution. And of course, we have lots of opportunity to discuss with our American colleagues here the best ways to achieve this. The final goal that I'd like to talk to you is 2020. 2020 is tomorrow, although we are still 9 years away. And 2020 means that in Europe, the decision has been made that every new building will be not a zero energy building, but a nearly zero energy building. The zero is probably not too cost effective. So nearly zero has to be, we need to get as close as possible to zero energy by 2020. And for public buildings by 2018, to set an example. Government buildings, local government, central government, whatever, everything occupied by official service. This is a challenge that was accepted unanimously by all the leaders of the European Union. They very easily said it and just told now every engineering department in the energy department and whatever department is taking care of it, just do it. That's the easy part. So everybody's thinking about it, and some countries have already some solutions. So we have taken this grand step as a decision. I hope that it will be indeed realized as such. This, of course, will mean lots of renewables, combined heat and power solutions, fuel cells, I mean, you name the solutions. I mean, we need innovation, and I think we need the same innovations that you do here. So we have quite a lot of worldwide innovation effort to come up with this new scheme. What happens next? Well, right now we have created a framework so that every building, especially new buildings, but also the existing buildings, will have increased energy requirements, energy efficiency requirements. This is already in place. We have certificates for all buildings. So we'll have maybe the 100 million, I don't know exactly how many buildings we have in Europe, but it's probably not too far from the same order of magnitude. So we'll have to have about 100 million certificates in about a few years. We'll see renewables and efficient systems in buildings more and more. It will be required and mandatory. And the existing buildings will be retrofitted. We still don't know how, but they will be retrofitted. We will move towards zero energy by 2020, both in new buildings and what's called ambitious fraction of the existing buildings by 2020. The rationale is the same that Steve just described for America. We'll need new products, innovation. It's the same thing. The price will go down with these new energy efficient solutions because they will be used more. This is a moving target, so I simply invite you to, if you are interested, to go to this website. We'll have, I cannot release them now because they will be released with iFanfare by the Commission on the 13th of April. So after that, it will be available on the site, but we have updated reports from every country, what they're doing and what the rules are. So I invite you to keep informed about it. And let's see if we can, on both sides of the Atlantic, to continue our cooperation and make sure that we go to and achieve our common goals, because it is the same objective that moves us. Thank you very much.